the new all-in-one knitting loom by the Authentic Knitting Board Company. I am going to show you how to assemble it, how to adjust it, and how to use it both as a round knitting loom and as a knitting board. And also I am going to briefly mention what type of yarns, weight of yarns you will be able to use with this knitting loom. Let's go forward and do that. For the specs of the knitting loom, it has 48 pegs on each of the long rails, 5 pegs on each of the sliders, for a total of 106. When you receive your knitting loom, it will arrive already assembled as you see it right here. It will have the 2 sliders on it, and then you will also receive a little bag that has the 2 spacers to use the knitting loom as a knitting board. It will come also with 2 smaller bolts and a knitting tool. Let's examine your knitting loom a little bit closer so that you can get more comfortable using it. The knitting loom has wing nuts at each end. You will remove these wing nuts in order to move the slider in and out, or also to take the sliders completely off and insert the spacers in so that you can use it as a knitting board. The knitting loom is made out of hardwood, very smooth, and it has a lacquer finish on it, which will prevent it from getting your yarn snagged on it. Okay, the pegs are made out of nylon, and each of them has a small groove on them so that you can slide your knitting tool on, and a small cap to prevent the yarn from slipping off. Okay, now I am going to go ahead and disassemble my knitting loom so that I can show you how to assemble it from the start. To unassemble it, I am going to undo the wing nut at one of the ends. I popped it off. Now you're going to pop the bolt out by simply pushing on it. And now you have a long bolt and a washer. And your slider will come off. Set it aside. And now we're going to do the same to the other side. So remove the wing nut. Pop the bolt. And the slider will come out. You have your other washer and the other bolt. Now that I have disassembled the knitting loom, you can see that it has a groove on the inside. That groove is used by the sliders to position the sliders at different intervals. It does not have to go through the hole. As you can see, it has a hole right there, but the slider does not need the bolt in order to be used. You can put the bolt through this one right here, but your slider can be right through the center and still your loom will be nice and stable. It is easier for me to demonstrate this with the knitting loom being apart so that you can see how the slider just moves up and down to your desired number of pegs. So let's say I wanted to make a baby size bootie that calls for about 24 pegs. So easily enough, I will move this slider down until I had 24 pegs or the desired number of pegs. I'll put that one there. Then the other one will go at the very end in this form. And I will have a smaller amount of pegs. All you need to make sure when you put that slider is that the slider pegs align with the pegs on the long rail, as you see right here. They are right aligned. If you were right in the middle of 2 pegs, your stitches will be a little bit off your gauge, especially at that corner. So make sure that you align those 2 pegs. Okay, perfectly. Now you have the 2 looms, the loom unassembled, Now I want to show you how to assemble it one more time to the way that you received it. To assemble it the way that you received it, you're going to put one of the sliders through, making sure that the grooves of the pegs are towards the outside of the knitting loom. Perfect. Now you're going to put the bolt, as you can see, has a hexagon shape. You're going to put that hexagon through the bigger hole opening on one of the rails. So put it through. There we go. Now slide the slider through, sitting it perfectly into the groove of the inside of that rake. Now you have that other side of the bolt. Put it through. Simply squish it in and make sure that everything sits perfectly in. Now grab your washer, put the washer in first, and then the wing nut. Tighten it just a tiny bit. Now the other side. Again, the pegs, make sure that the groove is towards the outside. Perfect. It's in place. The hexagon, pass it through the hole. The slider, other side of the slider, and through the hole. Perfect. Washer, wing nut, and ta-da, it's assembled again to the same way that you received it. Now let's say I have it in this position and I am ready to work on it, and I want to make a hat that calls for 84 pegs. So all you need to do is count 84 pegs. I know that the slider will give me 5 pegs each, so all I need to do is count 74 on the long rails. 74, so I know that I need 37 on each of the long rails. So I will count 37 pegs. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, 36, 37. Right here. So I will need to move one of my sliders all the way to this side. So all I need to do is loosen that bolt. You can mark that peg if it makes it easier for you, so that you know how far down to move it. So I'm just going to put a little rubber band on it, on those 2 pegs, so I know where to move my slider. So pop the slider off all the way through, take out the bolt. Perfect. Now I still need my slider, so all I am doing is taking the slider off the bolt and leaving it inside the groove. I'm going to put the bolt back on, put the washer and the wing nut. Don't tighten it too much just yet, just enough to hold it in place. And now slide your slider to the position that you need it on. I am right here. Again, I am going to use my rubber band just to hold it in place. Now that I know where I want my slider, I am going to go ahead and tighten the wing nut. My slider is in place and it's not moving. Now my knitting loom is ready with 84 pegs, and I am ready to knit my hat. Again, let's say you wanted to knit this time a smaller item such as a sock, and the sock calls for 36 pegs. So all you need to do is, one more time, loosen the bolt, Just a tiny bit, not very much. Take off that rubber band, slide it down. Make sure that you use some of the holes that are closer to your slider. Put it through the washer. Get your washer, put the washer on, and tighten it up. And over here your loom is ready to be used at a smaller setting. Over here we have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. We have 30 pegs right here. And you can make a little booty or a smaller sock right here. Let's say you wanted to make an even smaller item, just loosen that bolt, slide that slider even a little bit smaller. Make sure you align the pegs and you're ready to knit an even smaller item. Perfect. Now I'm going to show you how to use it as a knitting board, how to assemble it to use it as a knitting board. So let's loosen out the bolts. I'm going to take all of them off. Pop off the bolts. The sliders will come off. We're not going to be using the sliders anymore, so set them aside. We're not going to be using the longer bolts. We're going to use the smaller bolts that were sent with our package. So take out that little bag. Has your smaller bolts and your spacers. Let me show you the difference in the length of the bolts. One of them is a lot shorter than the other one. Top one is used with the sliders. The bottom one is used with your spacers. Your spacers, as you can see, have different holes, which means they will provide you different thicknesses, different gauge for your knitting board. Over here you have one. If you were to turn it this way, you will have a wider one. If you were to turn it this way, you have a wider one. So you have all different forms of using this little spacer to provide you different gauges on the knitting board. I repeat, this is for the knitting board. Okay, let's put it together. Let's assemble it. So again, you are going to be using this hexagon bolt. You're going to put the hexagon bolt through the larger hole. Now slide your spacer. You can slide it this way, that way. I'm going to slide it this way. Now I'm going to put the other rail through. Perfect. See that? Put your washer on. The wing nut. Tighten it just a tiny bit. Perfect. Now you have the other side. Your spacer. You can either put the spacer first or the bolt first. I kind of like to put the bolt first so that I can see through the hole. And then slide that bolt. Make sure that that bolt, that hexagon bolt, goes inside the hole. That it sits inside. Once it's inside, align your spacer. Now you're ready for the washer. And your wing nut. Now that you have both spacers in, tighten both sides really tight so that you're ready to use your knitting board. Now over here, your knitting loom is a knitting board. Ooh, magic. Okay, look, you have two rails. You're able to knit back and forth as on a regular authentic knitting board, or you can also just use one side and use it as a single-sided rake. Your knitting will come through the center on the knitting board, right through here. It will trickle down. And there you have it. That is the knitting board. Both a round knitting loom, a knitting board, all all-in-one, the perfect name for this knitting loom. Now the next question about this loom is, what type of yarn can you use on it? What thickness of yarn? Alright, I have been able to use worsted weight yarn and gotten about 9.5 stitches in 2 inches. That is a very tight knit. I have also used DK weight yarn, and with that I got 11 stitches per 2 inches. So about 5.5 stitches in 1 inch. That is a very tight knit. Both of the yarns that I used were merino wool. I hope you give this knitting loom a chance. And again, like I said, it is very high quality. The knitting loom itself is made out of hardwood, nylon pegs that are grooved. The wood is lacquered on so your yarn won't get caught onto anything. The bolts themselves, they are very smooth, and although they're in the corner, you really do not feel them. And I have already created about 6 or 7 items on it. Not once did my knitting get caught on it. Of course, if it does get caught, make sure that you gently pull your knitting off of it so that you don't rip it off, the knitting, that is, not the bolt. The bolt won't come off. I hope you enjoy this. And again, this is the all-in-one knitting loom by the Authentic Knitting Board Company, and you can find it at knittingboard.com. And I hope you enjoy this. My name is Isela Phelps, and we'll see you next time.